Okay, this week I find myself in an unusual position, and I don't like it. I find myself on the fence. And what's put me there is this week's story about how employers are now within their rights to sack staff for wearing headscarves and all of the symbols of religion. Okay, so for me, banning headscarves is nuts, and the idea of banning all other symbols of religion, the cross, the turban, the wimple, the kippah, skull cap, actually makes me feel quite emotional. I have these terrible visions of a nun's headdress being ripped off or a Sikh man having to unwind his turban. However, there's also this niggle in my head that says, why shouldn't employers have the right to say to people, this is our uniform, this is what we want you to wear? What's wrong with them saying we don't want religious resentment in the workplace, and religious symbols can cause resentment? So if you can't deal with that, don't work here. That's not demonising any religion, is it? It's just saying practice it at home, in society, but not at work. Is that so bad? Won't it engender the neutrality the EU court says we should have, or will it foster resentment among all religions?
Carole, I'm a bit disturbed about where I find myself.
With me, you mean?
Because I think I might agree with you, and that I find very...
so you're on the fence.
Well, I'm beginning to wonder whether there's anything wrong with me now. So, yeah, I am on the fence because I can't see really why someone should object to someone wearing, say, a headscarf at work. It seems to me, if that's what their religion requires of them, or that's what they think their religion requires of them, I don't find that offensive. I don't see any reason why someone shouldn't wear a cross if they wish to. I don't think it creates resentment personally. So I think what was interesting was looking at the reaction to that judgment, because the judgment basically is what the position is in Britain anyway. But I thought, I didn't like the way that some of the right wing decided that this was a good judgment for them.
Can I just say, before we pile in on it, I spoke to my husband's 86-year-old mum about this. She's a Muslim. She's from Sarajevo. She lived through the war where Muslims were being slaughtered because of their religion. And she sees all that. And I asked her what she thought. And she said, there shouldn't be any symbols of religion in the workplace. And I found that she's wiser than I will ever be. And I said, why? And she said, OK, so imagine you're in a small office. You have a guy in a skull cap sitting next to a Palestinian. Before they've ever spoken a word, there's a historic resentment there. However you cut it, there is. It might not be spoken, but it's there. When you're in a workplace with, Muslims and Sikhs, there is a historic resentment there. Isn't it better that if we all worked? I can't decide. Isn't it better that we all work together, not knowing what God any of us worship?
No, not at all.
And especially, but as Greg and I were saying before, don't employers have the right to say, I don't want religion in the workplace because of the resentments, because of might even be unspoken resentments, but they'd be there nonetheless.
Well, I think the thing is, the great thing about the workplace is actually it's in those environments that you're able to sort of bridge the divide. I think we have communities who may historically be at odds with each other, but actually when you're in a working environment and you have to work with someone on a team or whatever, that is how you're able to sort of get across those divisions. And I went to a very multicultural school where symbols of religion were allowed, and it was great. It fostered us, it enabled us to have conversations about those religions and why, those particular symbols were used. And I think at the end of the day, it actually helped to unify us. And the only other thing I would add to this, I think actually as an employer, if you do enact that sort of policy, you're missing out on possibly some really good talent, because there will be people who that is a deal breaker for, who will not join your company. And you know what? That's your loss.
If we're talking about headscarves, and I have no objection to
any
anyone
symbol
wearing
of
a
religion,
headscarf.
Any symbol.
I think it's nuts for people to object to that. But I do have, when I look at someone wearing the full burqa and the headdress, that does disturb me slightly. If you're working alongside someone whose face you can't see, how can you ever make a connection? You're talking about people making connections. How can you make a connection with someone whose head is covered and whose face you can't see?
Do you think that's okay, wearing a full burqa, for example?
Well, to me, it's not about whether or not I think it's okay. It's a case of, as with anything, when you understand why someone feels the need to do that, I think you look at it differently. You sort of you develop some more compassion.
Why do women in this country,
it's not for me,
in this Western free country, why do they feel the need to cover their faces and wear cages on their faces? I don't understand that. And I would find...
But that's their choice.
Yeah.
Well,
that's their choice. That's their choice. I mean, what interests me in the workplace is things... If you have two people from Northern Ireland and you introduce them, the first question they ask,
what side?
Which school did you go to?
There you go.
Because from the moment they know which school they went to, they know whether they're Catholic or Protestant.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think actually have these discussions in the workplace because these are people who are friends, maybe.
Yes,
and they're people you like.
But are we sort of slightly ignoring the elephant in the room, which is that this isn't about let's say, June wearing a cross, which I think you've worn before, and let's say this was banned in the workplace, then you wouldn't be able to wear that to Sky.
Yeah.
It's a way of anti-Muslim prejudice in the workplace.
Honest.
And then, of course, we've got all this other thing about how the employment... employers are not allowed to say to women, you've got to wear high heels and short skirts.
Yes.
But according to you, employers have the right to tell their employees
what to wear and what not to wear. I'm asking the question.
Actually,
Should employers have the
where
right?
do you stand on that?
I have a problem with it because there's a part of me. There's a part of me that says, when you're employing someone, if you want to portray your company as a neutral company, as a religious-free neutral company, and you're paying the people who wear it, do you have the right to do that? On the other hand, I'm thinking of the Sikh guy who would have to take his turban off.
No, but Carole, to me, that's insane to say you want to present your company as a...
Why is it?
No, let me finish. Because if you have somebody who obviously is wearing a symbol of whatever religion, their religion, that does not mean that your company is that religion. So to me, that argument doesn't even stand for a nanosecond. If I go to McDonald's and somebody with a Sikh man with a turban serves me, I don't think all of a sudden McDonald's is now Sikh. No, I don't. That's that individual's religion. I don't think that has a bearing on the company. And back to my point, I think any company that does this is really is preventing itself from getting some great talent, because you know what, you want to make sure that your talent pool is as wide as possible to get the best people, whatever their religion
Well,
is.
if someone is wearing the full hijab, the whole gear, and they're dealing with the public, does that create difficulties or not?
I think it
does, but I think that the Women's Muslim Network, who we're going to see in a second, is pointing out that this is going to be seen as a discrimination against all Muslims, and that is regrettable. I'm sort of with you on the full face covering, though, Greg.
If what we're saying is that in order for you to apply for a job, you have to dress and look a certain way, it is going to put off Muslim women. Because likewise, if the rule said you had to wear high heels, or you had to wear a mini skirt, or you had to wear makeup, some women would be put off from applying for those roles.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And I've got a quote here, Rachel, from the Conference of European Rabbis. And it says, with the rise of racially motivated incidents and today's decision, Europe is sending a clear message: its faith communities are no longer welcome. Yeah.